Great. So the meeting is being recorded, and good morning. I'd like to call the meeting order, St. Louis County Workforce Investment Board for October 18th, 2023. Mavis, would you please call the roll?
Good morning. Calling roll, Brad Ackman,
Present.
Jason Archer.
Here.
Jim Barrett,
Here.
Caroline Battles,
Here.
Jerry Bowles, John Bowman, Brian Karp,
Here.
Phyllis Ellison, John Gall, Mary Grott, Elliot Henry, Quintus Henry,
Good morning.
Linda Huntsman,
Good morning, present.
Jeff Mazur,
I'm here.
Lee Metcalf,
Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Lydia Mitchell,
Present.
thank you. Gwen Mizell,
Here.
Mary Moriarty, Robert Morrison,
Present.
Vanessa Parker Lewis, Reginald Scott.
Present.
I would like to ask for Mary Moriarty. I see her.
I'm
on
on
the-
here. Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you. We have quorum.
Thank you. First order of business, approval of minutes. The minutes were distributed for the July 24th meeting. If there are any additions, comments, edits, please speak up. I can't see everyone on the screen. And if there are no edits, comments, I would entertain a motion to approve the previous minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Any abstentions? Hearing none, the previous minutes have been approved. The next order of business is a message from the Director of Human Services. Mr. Howard Hayes, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members. Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a bus tour that I'm a part of with the state, visiting properties around the county, so I'll leave a little early. But I did want to acknowledge and recognize our new board members. I understand that we have from Castle, Miss Linda Hudspeth, Linda's family around here. Welcome, Linda. Phyllis Ellison, St. Louis Community College. Rob Morrison, Pfizer Corporation. Brian Korf, Gateway Studios, and Jim Barrett, Teamsters Union. Thank you all very much for your service. That's it for me, Mr. Chairman.
Terrific. Thank you. The next order of business is my remarks. And I thought for my remarks, why don't we go through and allow the new board members to say hello and introduce themselves if they want to say the organization they're here representing. I know you just introduced them, Howard, but give everyone a chance to kind of speak for a second. So, Linda, would you like to go first?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Linda. Jim Barrett.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me as well. I work for Teamsters Local 688 here in St. Louis, represent around 7,500 to 8,000 members any given time, up and down the eastern side of the state and as far west as Columbia, Missouri.
Thank you. Brian Karp.
Hi, thank you all for welcoming me. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Gateway Studios and Production Services. We are the giant buildings coming out of the ground over by the Spirit of St. Louis Airport.
Thank you. Good morning. Rob Morrison.
Greetings. My name's Rob Morrison. I've been working in the St. Louis area for about 30 years now. So I'm a chemist, biochemist by training, and I represent Pfizer, but also all of the great biotech and biomanufacturing we do in the area.
Thank you. I don't think that Phyllis was able to join us this morning, just to make sure. Well, thank you all. Welcome to the board. We really appreciate you joining the group and lending your expertise and insights to the areas that you represent to our board. So we appreciate you and your time. Next order of business, hand it over to the Director Laposa.
All right, good morning, everyone. It's been a little bit since we last got together, so good to see you all again and good to see some fresh faces joining our board. I'll just reiterate Director Hayes and Chairman Archer's appreciation for the service of the new board members and making sure most of you are all in attendance today. So appreciate that, showing up for your first board meeting. We still have an orientation to do that we'll do at some point in November that you'll see a follow-up on, but we're happy to have you to be present for your first meeting. And I also want to acknowledge that Valerie Moore with OWD is also on the call today. She is here as a proxy or a representative for Jerry Bowles, who wasn't able to make it, so I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge her. And then I've been informed that John Bowman is also joined us. He is called in, though, so he's one of the call-in users that we have with us. So just wanted to make sure before we proceed that we acknowledge others that are in attendance. So today we're going to give an update on a couple things and then also take some votes that are still outstanding that we need to take. Normally we take these at the beginning of the program year, which tends to be at an August meeting. So we're meeting for the first time in October for this program year. So we want to take some votes on some standard items that you all have voted on previously that support our programming. So we'll do that momentarily, but we'll start just by giving kind of highlights from PY22, which officially ended in June 30th of 2023. We had one meeting shortly thereafter, but we really haven't done much of a recap. We're going to go more into performance at the next board meeting in terms of our overall performance measures and how we fared with our DOL negotiated rates. But we're going to just take some time briefly to kind of walk through some of the things that occurred in 2022, PY22, and then also talk about some of the things that have been gone on since the last meeting that we had. So I'm going to pull up a slide deck real quick. It's not going to be too long. Let me just make sure I can share this. Okay, can everybody see Jason, if you could give me a thumbs up, can you see the blue screen without the black kind of corners or surrounding?
We're good.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So In the last program year, we had a number of hiring events that we just wanted to call out that despite a challenging year, as many of you know, with ending contracts with one of our subcontractors, we continue to provide services across a variety of industries. For those who are new to the board, you know, the Job Center is really a critical resource in the community for providing opportunities for employers to meet directly with employees, the potential employees or job seekers. So we all know that workforce shortages is a critical issue affecting our regional economy, and the Job Center is really well equipped to provide the space and the resources to facilitate connections. So in the last year, in 2022, we ended up hosting around 200 hiring events, and these hiring events continued into 2023 up and through where we are today in October. But these hiring events were really supported by employers across a variety of industries, including information technology, healthcare, construction, logistics, and distribution. And these are the areas that we've called out previously in our local plan as key sectors for our region. We also know that we have bioscience and geospatial and other industries that we're looking to target as well. But the majority of our hiring events occurred in those industries that I mentioned there. In gathering customer feedback data, which we're required to report to the board every meeting, wanted to note that based on the summary totals from PY22, which we saw roughly 600 surveys, I think, based on the numbers that we saw, the survey completions, we had an overwhelmingly positive response to the experience that customers had while they were in the Job Center. So roughly 65.66% of customers were satisfied with the services they received, and the others were very satisfied. The very small sliver, that 0.5%, that's not accounted for here, they were either dissatisfied or neutral in their perspective about the services they received. But in most cases, the folks who came into our Job Center, who were here for a variety of reasons, felt that they got what they needed while coming to the Job Center. And just for those, again, who are new to the Workforce Development Board and this world of WIOA that we operate in, you know, the core reasons why people come into a Job Center is not just for job assistance or connection to employment. It's also for unemployment assistance. Folks may be coming into our Job Center to enroll into a skills-based training program that ensures that they're on a path to the career that they're choosing. They may be attending workshops or hiring events. Our workshops are facilitated by our subcontractors and tend to focus on things like development, interview preparation. They give tips on how to make a career change or how to succeed when you first start your new career. So those are resources, again, that are publicly available to the community to come in and take advantage of, and it tends to be that most of the folks who attend our workshops are also enrolling in one of our WIOA-funded programs as well. We have food stamp recipients who come into the Job Center to meet with our partner organization, Better Family Life, who administers the MWA program or the Missouri Workers Assistance Program, and that's really meant to assist individuals in getting on a path to self-sufficiency and stability. And so some folks may come into our Job Center seeking those kinds of services, but then they also get referred to or potentially even co-enrolled in some of the other programs that we have. And then a lot of folks just come in because they want to conduct job searches using the technology and the resources we have. Many folks in our community use libraries for that kind of activity, but they also use our Job Center. And when they come into our Job Center, not only can they use the computers to work on the resume to conduct those job searches, but they're also here to get assistance with their career plan. And so since some of the priorities that we've had as a board since the last meeting, I'll just touch on a few of them here and answer any questions or get any feedback on this. But one thing that Director Hayes and County Executive Page have really pushed our division to do is to increase communication and public awareness of the great workforce events that we have. You know, one of the downsides, and we've mentioned this before, one of the downsides of WIOA is that we can't use a lot of our money for marketing to promote our efforts, so we depend on partner organizations or social media support from our friends in the county executive's office to help us amplify some of the work that's going on. But but we really have been working to try to get more coverage, positive coverage for the work that's been going on. We had a major hiring event. It was in partnership with the Construction Forum recently in September that actually ended up getting significant local media attention. We had a pretty high turnout. Over 100 individuals came in and met with partners in the skilled trades, met with employers, and it was young people as well as adults coming into the center that day. But the center was lively, filled with activity, and we had local media, KMOV and KSDK, who did some positive stories on it. We also had, we've also had an attempt to make sure that our community services aren't just at the job center. So one effort that is underway is to make sure that we're using some of the partner organizations that we have as leverage to get more resources into the community to meet people where they are. We have a partnership with the St. Louis County Library where on a monthly basis, our job center services are there present at a resource event that a local library branch is hosting. And these local library branches are across the county, so South County as well as North County. And we are presenting information, resources about our job center services, engaging individuals who might be coming into the public libraries for that resource event and making sure that they understand what we can offer and helping them. And then so that's an exciting development, again, where we're working with partners to make sure that we have essentially some satellite resources being provided outside of the Comprehensive Center out at Northwest Crossings in St. Anne. And we're eager for more of those partnerships. So, to the extent that you're connected to or working with partner organizations that might have regular events where it would make sense for us to be a resource. I know Mr. Bowman actually invited us to an event one time that he was a part of and that he was helping to lead and host. The Job Center is always happy to support those events. We recently had one in partnership with Shalom Church in Hazelwood East High School this past weekend, and that was another opportunity where we were partner organizations, but a partner organization that came in and offered resources and tapped into an existing fair that had already been created. So we're looking to do more of that in this program year. And then we're also looking at our affiliate sites as well. As you all might know, right now we have our comprehensive job center at the Crossings that we certified in the summer of this past year or this current year. And then we also have what we're allowed to do, which is to create affiliate sites or specialized centers where we can get referrals from participants in the community that might go to one of those centers and then refer them to the comprehensive center to get the holistic services that support their ongoing career path and access to the WIOA resources that we offer. So previously we had the Met Center as an affiliate site. We had North Oaks as an affiliate site. We did not renew the certifications for those sites at this time, but it is important to consider what we want as our affiliate locations for St. Louis County moving forward. And one opportunity that we saw was a partnership with the R&R Marketplace. If you're not familiar with that effort, it was a major announcement that was made this past September as well, that in the Delwood area where there was an old Schnucks Plaza, now there's an employment center as well as child care services, as well as banking services available to the community in the Delwood neighborhood as well as the surrounding Ferguson area. And that it stands for Refuge and Restoration. It's led by Pastors Beverly and Ken Jenkins. And that's, again, an exciting new space for people in the community to go to find resources. So we'll be partnering with R&R Marketplace to have WIOA services provided on site. We haven't designated them officially as an affiliate site or a specialized center yet, but we've committed to partnering with them to have resources available outside of that center. And once we get our contracts in place fully with the new providers, which is really pending in the next couple of weeks, we're going to ask that they allocate some staff time to being available at least weekly to provide services to individuals that might be using the R&R Marketplace services. And again, that's helping us to expand our reach beyond just the walls of the government center at the Northwest Crossings location. So any questions about those activities so far? I have a few more things to touch on, but wanted to pause there, and especially interested in any board members' thoughts on how do we get more of our services out into the community? What does that look like you know, to you? Do you have any thoughts or recommendations on how we do that? Because it is going to be a big focus for us as we continue to move forward throughout this program year. So I'll just pause for a moment and see if anyone has any thoughts on that.
Hey, Greg, this is Gwen Mizell. Good morning, everybody. Just a quick question for you. So in your report, you indicated that we surveyed and got wonderful survey results based on the survey respondents being either satisfied or very satisfied. And looks like great survey, 98%-ish, kind of a 99% kind of satisfaction. So those are huge percentages. So just wondering, are the primary questions that are asked on the survey related to the experience and the ease of use, and or do they relate to outcomes? So that's one question. Then the second question is as we look at other ways to connect with affiliates that could broaden the reach and take things to a more of a community level, how are we thinking about being informed about the need for that? Like, do we have some way of pulsing the population to say, here's what we really need? Is it embedded in the surveys to say, here's what we really need? We really want locations that are closer to us. What's the driver for us, standing up a new affiliate? What's the criteria that we use?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So to your first question about what are the survey questions, typically the survey questions are designed to understand what the customer experience was like, to your point, when they come into the job center. So it'll ask the reasons for why they visited, and then it'll ask whether or not while they were here, they were satisfied with the services they received. And then it also asks them, did you have everything that you came in here for met, all your needs that you came in here for met? And so respondents will say yes or no to that question. And I would say that that's considered a certain outcome related type question in terms of the outcome that they might have had when they came in was to get help with their resume, for instance. It's not that granular in terms of the results that we get back, but that's a successful outcome for the person who came into the center to get their resume developed and to get support with that. Could be that's a particular outcome for that participant. So we would say that that's more outcome-based. But a lot of the questions are more about, did you get the services you needed? How was the treatment of the staff to you, while you were here? So it's more experiential related and not necessarily performance related per se. But you raise a good question and a good point about outcomes and performance. That actually is a good segue into some other things that we'll talk about shortly. But I would say that the surveys that we have could be enhanced to ask more questions about, especially what types of services that customers are actually looking for, so that we can start to do what you said, Gwen, which is to actually be more intentional about what we offer at the crossings, but also thinking about, are there needs that are not being met at the crossings that could be met through another partner organization, and based on what we hear from the community when they're telling us what they're looking for in terms of job opportunities, in terms of specific occupations that they want to pursue, and what types of training programs that they want to enroll in. That might inform us in terms of what our strategy really needs to be in terms of thinking about some of these satellite locations or access point locations where we can partner with organizations that might be out in the community and deliver those services even better than we currently can at the crossings. But allows us to still leverage our resources. What we don't want to do is be place-based and confined only to one geographic area, and we know that there's needs across the county. So right now, I think I can say that the centers that we currently have, we're at the crossings because it's the primary government center in North County, connected to, St. Louis County government, so we're a part of that. But, North Oaks and the Met Center are in areas, zip codes that are historically underserved, that have areas of concentrated poverty, and so our goal was to have services there. And again, we might reestablish those as affiliate sites and recertify them as affiliate sites as well. But I think now is a good inflection point for us to step back and say, looking at zip code data, looking at, unemployment data, and looking at where our services are most needed, how do we make sure that we're being intentional with where we establish our affiliate sites, because those sites have been partner sites for us for a while, and we continue to see them as a value. But there may be others like the R&R marketplace that we want to look at as potential partners moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
Greg, this is Lee Metcalf.
Yes.
I think the tremendous effort in the outreach efforts, and the challenge is obviously some of the restrictions we have on how we can do this. So my hat's off to you with what is happening so far. Is it possible maybe that we have areas of focus across our board that you'd like to have either committees or other kinds of engagement around critical topics like this one, outreach, where we can continue to amass ideas to open up the aperture even further, or at least to discuss pros and cons. An example would be, the schools, the public school infrastructure, whether that's an outreach mechanism. I'm sure there's pros and cons there. There may be others, but whether or not we want to create some centers of gravity topics that the board members might have an interest in and can continue to help you with. This is a topic I'd like to come back to you and the chairman around. What do we have now? What might we want to do in the future? Where's there energy on the board for certain topics, etc.?
Yeah, no, all great points, and I think that many of our board members have certain passion points, reasons why they decide to join the board, and we probably, well, I'll just say candidly, I don't think we leverage the talents and the resources that you all bring enough. And I know everyone's busy too, and there's always constraints on time, but to the extent that board members want to engage in a more hands-on way, and it's happened in kind of anecdotally or in one-off type opportunities where a board member might say, hey, I have this event that I'm going to be a part of. Can you bring some of your job center resources, like Mr. Bowman that I mentioned earlier? There's others that may get really in the weeds with me on thinking about strategy around a particular area, like apprenticeship, for instance, which we'll talk about in a second. But I do think we can create more formalized opportunities through a committee of sorts. We have a standing youth committee, so if you're invested in the young people, Jason Archer currently chairs that small subcommittee, but that includes some partners with local school districts. But it's not enough, I think, and we need more of the county school districts a part of that, Lee. But I would say that that's one committee. But outside of that, some of our other committees that we've had in the past that have operated, we could really reboot and reestablish. We have a disability resource committee. We've had an employer engagement committee in the past. These are committees that we should look at, but there might be other areas that are really important and pressing that we can create committees for, and our bylaws give us the ability to do that. So open to ideas or suggestions on, certain committee ideas, and we can pose it to the board to see if we can get interested members who might want to serve on a committee, and then also bring in stakeholder groups that would help to support that committee as well. And look at that as a key activity for closing out or moving into 2024. I think it would be timely to do that.
With our new board members, I think it is timely. So great. Let's keep it. Good stuff.
Yep. Sounds good. Thanks for the idea. Okay, so the remaining items I just want to touch on real quick is to Gwen's point just recently about data. We have to be data-driven in terms of our approach to workforce development, and I would say that that's just not only a recognition that WIOA has. The WIOA board, or WIOA legislation authorizes the board to really respond to the local needs of the community and trust that we're using data to inform our decision maker, and also that our decision making, that we're also aligned to what employers in industry say are most important. But we have very limited, I think, data resources at the moment to do the best job in accomplishing that. We do get regular reports on local labor market data that's shared with us by the state of Missouri via MERIC, which is the research data arm for economic development for the state of Missouri, and they'll run reports on St. Louis County. But some of that's not always, real time enough for us to be able to make quarterly decisions about where we form new partnerships, about what services we offer. We have, annual reports in this region. We have strategies that have looked at and gathered data, but again, we're not looking at it necessarily in real time in the way that we need to. And also, we have maybe more limited visibility in terms of program performance data. We do look at our DOL, Department of Labor negotiated performance measures, which is credential attainment, earnings, employment for our participants, but we're not maybe asking about the quality of the experience that folks might have going into a particular training program, for instance. We contract with organizations to deliver services to people in the community, but unless we're really intentional about evaluating the performance and raising awareness among our partners about the organizations that we trust to put people into those training programs with, then we're probably shortchanging our customers in terms of their best service. We need to take a better look, not just at getting folks enrolled as a metric. We tend to look at that as one of our performance metrics, and we followed the guidance in the state of the state in the past and looking at that as one of our metrics along with those other DOL rates. But really, an enrollment into a program is just the beginning, and the state is challenging us, and we're challenging ourselves to think more about the experience of the customer while they're going through a program. Are they getting adequate case management services? What does the quality of that look like? Are those individuals not only getting a job when they complete that training program, but are they getting a job in a high-growth industry that's going to lead to upward career growth versus just a wage that might be a living wage in the county, but not actually lead to wealth building or lead to being able to provide for their family. So we'd like to take a stronger approach to looking at the systems that we use, the data systems that we use, to evaluate the performance of our training providers, to evaluate the performance of our subcontractors, and to really look at the kinds of indicators and data sources that we need to be effective in that. So and this is something, again, too, that the county executive is passionate about, too. He's made the statement that workforce development needs to be data-driven, not relationship-driven. And in our community, we do have a lot of organizations that operate in this workforce development space that we have trusted relationships with, but we can't see that as the only reason why we might partner with organizations or as the primary reason. We have to really look at what the data shows us. And so we've been embarking on an RFP to have a company really to help us think about what data systems do we need as a workforce development board to assist us in making sure that our workforce development services are truly data-driven. And again, it has two components. One is looking at how do we more effectively respond to what the labor market data shows in real time and where we need to target our resources to job seekers, as well as what partners we need in terms of training providers to meet the needs that we see in the community. And then two, to also make sure that we have an effective evaluation tool that allows us to look in depth at some of those points that I just made about case management, at points about the longevity of someone's career after they've gone through a program, after exit from our WIOA services, those kinds of elements. And so we don't necessarily have the solutions. We're asking for ideas for those solutions. And so that RFP is out there, and we've collected some proposals, but we haven't done the evaluation yet for those proposals. And so I think this is a good opportunity to let the board know that if there is someone interested in serving as a expert, you can't be a voting member based on our county policy. We have to have county merit employees be the evaluation committee for that RFP, but the board could send a representative or a couple representatives to be subject matter experts to provide guidance on that data project as well. And so I would say that, if you're interested, please just send me an email after the meeting and let me know, and we can look at adding you to the committee for that. But that'll be something that I think this data project, again, I know I spoke in kind of general terms, but the idea is to make sure that we have a resource that we can use to intentionally make better decisions about who we're contracting with. And we're trusting that there's folks in the community, especially in the technology space or the data industry, that might have some thoughts on the best approach for doing that. So that's an exciting development. And again, it'll be what guides a lot of our thinking around our local plan, which I'll get to in a moment too. But the other piece that I want to mention is we're looking at expanding apprenticeships more and more. The county is going to really be a critical driver of apprenticeship growth and expansion. We have National Apprenticeship Week coming up in November. So we want to highlight some of the partnerships that we have, like the one that we have with Washington University, where we've been working with them now to support 50 to probably close to 100 at this point, medical assistants in going through an apprenticeship program or an incumbent worker training program where they're getting their credential as medical assistants, but they're also getting paid while they're learning that craft or that skill. And so the apprenticeship opportunities, I think, are abundant in our community. There's a lot more employers that are looking at apprenticeship as a potential model for their talent development internally, or even to recruit talent. And we know that the data shows that there's cost savings associated with investing in talent through an apprenticeship type model. Employers are more likely to keep employees that they invest in and move to the next level in terms of their career through this type of opportunity. And more people are not looking to go to school to stop their progression towards a career and getting income. And in these times when we're still dealing with inflation and challenges in our economy, people want to be able to work and also be able to pursue an education that's valuable. So apprenticeship is an area that we want to look at. How do we diversify the apprenticeships we have? Right now we only have apprenticeships that we support in healthcare, but we know that there's others across our region that we need to be enrolling people into. We are looking at Access Point, for instance, as a good apprenticeship opportunity to enroll youth participants into. And while Lee's on the call too, want to acknowledge that Lee, congratulations, you were able to get the Access Point program registered as an official apprenticeship. And Lee had extended an opportunity for me to come and attend the ceremony where the Department of Labor presented the certificate to acknowledge and award that registered apprenticeship. And so I know that was an effort, and you'd been talking about that for some time. So I want to give you a quick moment to say a couple words on that if you want, Lee, but congratulations on that. And that's, again, forward momentum. You're looking at IT then in that area as apprenticeship training. Do you want to say anything about that real quick?
Thanks, Greg. Just 3 quick comments. One, the evolution of thought in the IT industry around degrees and certifications, they're interested in people who can do the work. And so it's a knowledge-based movement. Much of this has been gone to school on what the construction industry has done. So there's some great insights around how we leverage that because it's mostly a vo-tech environment now in the IT industry. The second is that this is an apprenticeship that already has the eye on the prize. The companies that have stepped up, and I want to thank Gwen and Ameren as one of those companies, to engage with basically guaranteeing a job if the young person finishes the entire cycle of training and apprenticeship. So it's not just an end, it's a means with an end already in hand. And so that's a critical component that's different than many other apprenticeships. And the final item is the issue simply of being able to continue to mature these young folks. Their professional development skill sets as well as their technical skill sets are so important. And whether these different efforts have the breadth of engagement, the breadth of support, organizations such as this workforce development infrastructure, that was really important, but it's not enough. And so you come back to concepts that are embedded in this particular apprenticeship, which we've come to call hypercare and hyper coaching, which are things that have to happen all the way along that help these young folks actually come over some of the barriers, particularly the group that this workforce development infrastructure is there to support. It can't do it without really looking at their life issues as well as their education issues in order to be able to get to the goal. So I'm proud to be part of something that's evolving in that regard. And to your point, apprenticeships are evolving all across the board. And this is just one in the information technology industry that is maturing. And we're learning. This is allowing me also, Greg, to get into the nuts and bolts of what our vendors do and don't do, how well they're doing it. As you well know, I had a chance to be able to work with one of the vendors to see how many of our young folks actually qualified for WIOA. And I'm discovering some really interesting, as they say, the devil's always in the details. And so seeing literally what has to happen to figure out how to qualify somebody for our money has been eye-opening.
Yep. Well, thanks for that, Lee, and thanks for bringing that. I know you've been talking about Access Point for a while with this board. It is doing great work, and again, it's a model that's been pointed to regionally as a successful one. But yes, to your point, there's resources available, but how do we actually make sure that we go through the right regulatory framework and processes necessary to use the funds that we have to support initiatives like that, and finding partners that are willing to work with us in these processes is very important. We don't want folks to shy away from working with government or with WIOA-funded programs because there's too much red tape or too many challenges or perceived challenges with that. And I think our staff could make it, we could collectively work to make it easier for partners as well. So maybe that's part of the process design that we'll be looking at too, as we look more at data and think about, continuous improvement. So
that's huge. I applaud this group's efforts to expand our engagement with apprenticeships. Keep going.
Yep. All right, and then final point just to raise for you all is that we have our local plan due in next year, 2024. I believe it's due by May of next year, so we have a little bit of time here. But this is a great opportunity for committee to form a committee of leaders from this board, and especially if there's any new members who are interested in devoting some time to serving in this way. We really want a fresh new local plan for St. Louis County. What the local plan is if we've maybe forgotten, for those who've been here with us for a while, for those who are new, this will help as an introduction to what it is. But it's essentially our strategy for the board and our strategy for our St. Louis County from a workforce development perspective. And so we work on a local plan and have to submit it to the state of Missouri for approval every 4 years. The last one that we submitted was submitted in 2020. So it was really on the heels of the start of the pandemic. And I'd say that we've learned a lot and changed a lot, and this board has changed a lot actually since 2020 in terms of adding, probably at least 50% of the board is probably new, 50% or more even is new to the board since 2020 even. So there's a great opportunity for us to take a fresh look at what our vision is, what our key goals and objectives are, what industries we care about in terms of our workforce development services. The data project and gathering more data to help make those decisions should be a critical instrument for us to take that step back, look at what the goals need to be, and then really design a local plan that we can embrace. Right now, if you looked at our local plan, it is publicly posted on our St. Louis County website, and you've seen at least the 2020 version back when we were in 2020, but it's a pretty lengthy document. It looks like a policy manual. It's 80 plus pages, has a bunch of amendments to it with policies that are relevant. We still have to submit those policies as attachments because the state requires it, but what I want this board to focus on is really crafting the vision and the key strategic priorities, and then all those policies and the various attachments that we have to provide to be in compliance with WIOA and to be in compliance with the state. Those are things that we basically ensure alignment between the vision, strategy, and our policies at the local level. And so I'm not asking the board to get in the weeds of developing, new specific policies for how to operate a WIOA youth program or how to determine eligibility for youth. That guidance has been handed to us in a lot of ways, and then we make local policies to enhance it. But what I am asking the board to do is really see the opportunity here to help shape, again, the vision, the bigger picture vision, the bigger picture strategic priorities, and the objectives that this board needs to focus on. And then that is also a time to really look at those affiliate sites, look at where do we want our services in the St. Louis County area to be delivered, who makes the most sense to partner with based on the strategic vision we have. But I feel like in the past, we've kind of updated a vision, we've updated goals and objectives, but I would really like more hands-on support for taking the opportunity now to really look at what this Workforce Development Board needs to be as we move forward into the next 4 years, essentially. And it's really our governing document and strategic plan to guide us in that thinking. So you don't have to tell me now, but we will be looking for members who want to help really roll up their sleeves, and we'll have a few meetings about this. But the goal would be that before we get, maybe not by the next meeting, but the first meeting of the new year in 2024, that we have the vision and the strategy that can be presented, at least in draft form, to the board overall. And we'll try to find other ways to engage members in between meetings in that process to make sure that there's input and feedback that's relayed in more real-time fashion. But the key is to get some stewards of this vision in place so that you all can present to the board, what the vision could look like for St. Louis County, and then get feedback from the board. We'll refine it over the course of the spring and then submit it in May. But I think this is a good opportunity where you don't want our board staff, myself and my team, only presenting to you what we think the vision and the strategic goals should be. Certainly, we're seeing what on the ground work looks like in administering the programs, but you all also are looking at things with a fresh vantage point from whatever space you occupy and whatever you know about what's going on in the region. We want to make sure that we're tapping into opportunities, and we want to make St. Louis County's Workforce Board a regional convener for workforce. So we need to be thinking about, what you all are seeing in terms of the trends, in terms of where there's needs for resources and support, and in terms of who we really should partner with. So you don't have to say it now, but I just want you to think about that as well. It's a great opportunity, I think, to make sure that we have a board-developed vision versus just a board-supported vision that we present to you all. So that's my 2 cents on that. We're at a transition point. This whole year has been a transition, and we're at a point moving into 2024. We're still transitioning, but this is a good opportunity for us to have a new vision. So let me know if you're interested in that. Those are my final comments or updates on program. Anything need more clarity or any additional questions folks might have? Well, during the course of the presentation, I think we had someone join us, and so I want to acknowledge that Larry Davis is with us. He's with the County Executive's Office and does a lot of good work in the community in especially doing community engagement and outreach. He's been actually working closely with me to develop and implement a county-sponsored apprenticeship program. We haven't identified yet what that occupation is going to look like, but the county has certain positions that we're having trouble filling. And so there's a good opportunity for us to develop our own in-house apprenticeship program, too, for certain occupations. And Larry's, many ways, a key driver and impetus for that program. So just want to acknowledge his presence. Larry, if you're here, if you want to say a few words real quick, feel free. Well, he's here, but I don't know if he's unmuted. We can't hear you if you're here. Okay, well, we'll move on. Thanks for your attendance anyway. Mr. Chair, I think we're ready to proceed in the agenda after that report.
Director, I believe the next order of business is the financial report update, WIOA expenditures, and the WIOA PY23 and 24 budget allocations.
Okay, so I'm going to pull up the expenditure report for all of you. So this shows our WIOA expenditures for PY22, which, remember, PY22 doesn't have to get fully expended until 2024. So these funds last all the way through June of 2024. And then we just received our new allocations. I think the full amount of the allocation actually comes this month or has already arrived this month in October for our PY23 allocations. And so PY23 don't have to be used until or fully expended until 2025. And so we're focused first. It's the rule of first in, first out for us. So we have to spend the money that we have that's going to expire first before we get to that point. We've spent a significant portion of our adult funding. You see 66% of that has been expended. Our youth funding, as you know, much of the impact of terminating contracts with FWCA, that impacted our youth programs. And so we're still looking to get, we have a provider in place, Employment Connection, who's delivering youth services, but we're bringing on an additional provider to support the out-of-school youth program in particular. So those monies will be, and we're confident will be expended once we get that new provider to also be delivering services as well. But that's the lowest expenditure rate right now. And again, I think it's partly because of the transition that we've had in contracts and for a time not having as many direct participant services going into the the youth population. We did have a provider in place, but it wasn't the same bandwidth or capacity that we had with another contractor doing that same work as well. And then we're nearly 50% of our, we're approaching, I should say, 50% of our spending in dislocated worker. Historically, dislocated worker funding is always one that's been difficult to spend down, but we should be at 50%, close to 50% by the end of this year, and then we'll have 6 months to spend the remaining. But one thing that WIOA does allow is for us to transfer money if we need to. So if we see that we still have dislocated worker money that we're spending at a slower rate as we start off the next program, we start off the next calendar year in 2024 in January, we can look at moving, transferring some of that money over to the adult program, which tends to go through funds much faster. The adult program doesn't have as many requirements or regulations attached to how you qualify as a dislocated worker. It's a program for anyone who's 18 and over and who meets the income eligibility requirements, so it's a lot easier to spend those funds. And then we haven't spent anything from our PY23 funds. Again, we were just awarded these funds recently, and we're focused on spending the PY22 first. Any questions about expenditures? Okay, I'll stop sharing that then, and we can move to the proposed budget for PY23 funds. So let me switch over real quick. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this. It's a PDF. Can everybody see that? Okay, I see Jason nodding. Good. So this is just our PY23 allocation. So remember, again, we had these funds. Technically, the period of performance is July 1 through June 30th of 2025. So we have to create and submit a budget every year that we'll post publicly as well. But these budgets are really developed by our program as well as our fiscal staff, and based on current trends that we're seeing in terms of where we need to allocate money, and it's also based on past, historical data in terms of where we need to allocate funds. But I would say that many of these budgets are malleable in the sense that we can update and modify and make changes to as we're responding to the needs of the community. So we're never really fixed in the sense that, we have to spend exactly according to the current proposed allocations and how they're divvied up. We want to make sure that, again, if we need to put more money into our adult and dislocated worker program, for instance, that we can move money around as needed to do that. Or likewise, one out-of-school youth program might need additional resources that the other out-of-school youth program might not need, or maybe that other out-of-school youth program is not spending as much, so we might reallocate funding based on that. But that's all to say that this is a starting point budget for the year, and it's broken down in the typical categories that you all have seen before. Our adult and dislocated worker program supports adults over the age of 18, dislocated workers, anyone who's been laid off, maybe long-term unemployed, been separated from a company and is looking to get reemployed. Our one-stop budget is for our one-stop operator and one-stop system, which is basically how our job center functions. So the staffing that's needed to deliver services in the job center and resource the job center is essentially that one-stop budget. And then our youth program is always broken down into in-school youth and out-of-school youth. The in-school youth, for those who may not remember, are those youth that are currently enrolled in school. They're 14 to 21 in age. And this is a great opportunity where Lee's mentioned, partnership with school districts makes a lot of sense to provide work experience opportunities, to provide job shadowing opportunities or other career and technical education programs. And then our out-of-school youth program is geared towards those youth that may be disconnected from the labor force. They maybe finished high school but didn't pursue a post-secondary education or degree pathway, and they're looking to get reemployed, or they get employed, get reemployed, or maybe they are looking to develop a new skill set and maybe want to pursue a short-term credential in one of the programs that we offer. And so most of the budgets that you see here in this youth column are actually staffing budgets as well as direct participant budgets. So what I mean by that is, the money that we would allocate for like a work experience, for instance, we would pay for the youth's wages out of those funds. and we allocate that money to the subcontractors for the youth programs. And then our ITA budget, that's our tuition accounts for training. And a lot of our bread and butter and workforce development is in our WIOA training programs. And so that's money set aside and budgeted for skills-based training opportunities for the adult dislocated worker population. Mostly, we have enrolled youth into an adult program, co-enrolled them into an adult program so that we could use ITA funds to support their training. But think of this as basically subsidized tuition. So we can pay up to $10,000 per participant to enroll in a training program that's been approved by the county and that's approved by the state. And that's where those budgets there are meant to be allocated for that. Then we have what's called on-the-job OJT, or on-the-job training. That's where we work with an employer who's looking to bring on a new staff member and who maybe doesn't require a degree for that particular job, but does require some additional skills be developed, and maybe they have their eye on a good candidate, but that candidate doesn't yet have the skills that they need to be truly successful. And so we work with that employer. We actually pay for the wages of participants who go through an OJT program up to typically 6 months while they're in that program. This is different from apprenticeship in a couple of ways, but it's and we don't use it as much. That's why you see the budget's pretty small because we're paying for the wages versus the training, which is what we typically pay for with the apprenticeship opportunities. But it doesn't necessarily always lead to a credential. Like apprenticeship, we want all apprenticeships to have an industry recognized credential attached to it. And on-the-job training is really delivered primarily by the employer, where sometimes with apprenticeship, you can get a training provider and also an employer to partner together to support an apprenticeship opportunity. So there's some nuances and differences between the two, but you can actually use OJT funds for apprenticeship as well. So that's something that's allowable, but we don't have a sizable budget for it because we don't see as much interest in OJT as we do in other programs from employers. But that may change too based on our employer engagement. And so then we can make adjustments. For work experience, these are programs that support adults and dislocated workers in getting, especially if they've had a spotty work history, or maybe they haven't been employed in a long time. Work experience is a good opportunity to support those populations that may need to get some true work experience. Again, think about folks maybe who've been incarcerated for a period of time and they have been unemployed as a result of that, and maybe they need to get work history again in order to get their resume in a position to be more favorable for their employment opportunities. And so work experience can be used for adults. We typically use it for youth who maybe don't have work experience for the first time, but we can also use it for adults and dislocated workers to get them some additional skills while they're being paid by us, to their wages being paid by us to get them that experience. And then we count their successful completion and their participation as a indicator as to whether or not they're on a true path for longer term career advancement in whatever field that they get that work experience in. And we have incumbent worker training and apprenticeship programs. Incumbent worker training is where we work with an employer to develop their own talents, so we can pay for, in a lot of ways, at least 50%. Typically, especially with larger companies, we can pay up to 50% of the training costs. If an employer like a Washington University, who's one of our critical partners in incumbent worker training right now, they pay half of the tuition for the medical assistants. We pay the other half. And then WashU has to guarantee us that they're going to see a wage increase for those participants who successfully complete their program in order for us to contribute money to it. So incumbent workers are a great opportunity for employers to look internally and say, what high potential staff do I have that may have some of the basic foundational skills, but may need an additional credential or may need some additional skills in order to move forward in their career. And the great thing, again, is that we use these funds as leverage to also ensure that the participants, the individuals who go through the training, get an opportunity to get a promotion, get an increased wage, so it's supporting economic opportunity for the participant. But it's truly a win-win scenario because the employer also benefits from having the training subsidized by us, and then the savings that come from investing in their own talent versus having to go out and recruit additional or new talent. It's also one of the most flexible programs that we have too in terms of eligibility requirements. and so it can be used more flexibly. We should bring on more partners than just WashU for that. We did have another partner in Straight Up Solar, which is a solar installation company that also used this model, and we had about 10 to 11, I believe, participants go through that program, and the vast majority were successful. I think at least 80% successfully completed that program, earned a new certificate, and are still working at the company with increased pay. And then finally, we've already talked about apprenticeship. I think you all understand generally what that is, but it's a work and learn opportunity. We have CNA apprenticeship programs that we fund. We have healthcare apprenticeship programs that we fund, but we want to build out more apprenticeship opportunities. So we have a bigger budget than some of the other programs set aside for that, because we're paying for the training. And again, we want to expand our utilization of that model. So that's essentially the program side. I was just walking through, especially going in that much detail to, I hope you all aren't, or I hope you're all still with me, but I just wanted to make sure I went through those details, because when you see these budgets, I don't want you to just see it and say, here are the numbers, and that's that. I wanted you to actually see, I see your question, Lee, I'll get you in 1 second, but I wanted you to understand what these programs are and what we're funding when we set aside these resources. I'll just say too, before I get to you, Lee, is that here's a general operation budget too for internal operations. That's like administrative pay for staff of the board and program staff to support the administration of these programs. It also contributes to things like the infrastructure costs. We contribute rent to the crossings to support our job center here. So that's all included in total internal operations costs. And then if you're looking at these budgets too, you might say that it may seem short in some areas, or maybe it seems too much in certain areas. I will say what you're not seeing is the amount of carryover that we still are expending from PY22 funds. So those funds can also be used in addition, because we're spending those first, remember, those will be used in addition to augment the 23 budget that we have. And that budget was already approved last year by the board, but that's a budget that we're still expending on. And so the total amount of impact in terms of the resources we have is greater than the budget that you see here, which amounts to almost $4 million. But we have more money too from carryover that we're still using as well from the PY22 that I showed you from the expenditure report. Okay, so with that,
Greg,
yeah,
this is Rob
any
Morrison.
questions? Go ahead.
What's the relationship between potential funding in similar areas for the city?
You kind of cut out there at the end there. What did you say, the relationship between?
The fundings that you have here versus what the fundings might be in the city?
Oh, yeah. So the city of St. Louis through SLATE, if you're familiar with that workforce board, all of our allocations, all of our funds are determined by a formula. And so that formula is based on areas of concentrated unemployment, and it's based on population size. So from a WIOA formula allocation, we tend to receive more than the city of St. Louis. Now, the city of St. Louis also has other discretionary grants through the Department of Labor, through other organizations that probably enhances their budget even further. We haven't taken as many opportunities there as I think we can and we will in the future, but we operate mostly with our WIOA formula funds, and so our funding is determined based on that formula. So basically, the Department of Labor allocates money to the state of Missouri. Then the state of Missouri, using labor market data, Rob, they look at population size again in areas of concentrated unemployment. Sometimes our allocation drops or it moves up based on the economic circumstances. So an example with that was that last year we had a greater decrease in funds than we did the previous year, and part of that was the residual of the pandemic, which caused the areas of concentrated unemployment across the state to expand wider than just the major urban areas, and really was kind of widespread across Missouri for much of 2020 and then into 2021. So other regions that maybe didn't get as much money, like the central region, which is where Jefferson City is, and kind of the central part of Missouri, received a greater allocation. We saw more parts of southeast Missouri, for instance, receiving greater funding. So all that money then gets reallocated to the different regions based on economic circumstances. But it tends to be because of our population size. us in Kansas City, in the East Jackson area, in the Kansas City vicinity, we receive the greatest share of allocations per local board. There's 13 local regions, and so we receive the greatest share. In the city, again, I'm not sure what their numbers look like, but they have less money than us based primarily on population.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then we develop these budgets too, Rob, internally. So these aren't required. I mean, we have certain requirements for youth spending. For instance, there's some regulations that ensure that we have to allocate a certain amount towards work experience, for instance. But generally speaking, the local level creates their own budgets essentially. So these amounts aren't handed down necessarily because of that. So, Lee, you had a question I didn't get yet. Do you want to ask it now, or did we answer your question?
Get myself off mute. Thank you. I just wanted to go up a notch. I mean, you just alluded to it. So, you know, the board has a level of responsibility and trying to figure out exactly how well we need to understand this. So let me broach a couple of items. A, do we still have the financial committee, and what role do they play in helping you establish any of the components of this budget?
Sorry, I was looking for the mute button on the screen, but I need to do it on my phone. Yes, our executive finance committee tends to meet. We did not have the committee meet this month, but we did have the meet in August. And I don't believe that the committee, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chair, I don't believe the committee reviewed this budget. We've been finalizing this budget based on the allocations over the last couple of months. So this is the first time the executive committee is seeing it too, but the executive committee can and should provide greater, support for the financials. But we tend to, because it's a smaller group, we tend to review financials before every board meeting with the executive committee.
Fair enough. So particularly for the new members joining, there is an opportunity to get closer to the kind of processes that occur associated with this. This is kind of our meat and potatoes role, is to understand not only execution, but how much money is being put against certain things and how well is it being executed. So that leads me to, there is a criteria. You've alluded to a number of those elements. And just like we had some conversation around a little more insight as you evaluate vendors and understanding criteria, I would offer that it would be useful in these presentations to see some of that criteria. I'm sure part of this clearly is historic use. You have a long history of what got spent in each of these categories. You're having to assess now the issue of, carryover from the past, given some of the dynamics that we've been encountered over the last 18 months. You're also looking at certain trends. As best you can, back to the data, analyze what's happening in some of these categories, as well as what has happened. And putting all that together, this is the fruits of your labor, which, quite frankly, I have a lot of confidence in. I want to say that for the rest of the board members. But I would also say that I think this really is something we've got to learn to be closer to and understand, and maybe even show as a precursor to this decision, which you're about to ask us to vote on. What are the criteria that have gone into this in general, levels of confidence that you feel about the allocations that you've laid out, or maybe even have been dictated to you. And so as we're trying to find our balance around our fiduciary responsibilities as a board, I think this is really a critical component of that, and learning and understanding what looks like on the face of it, a real alphabet soup of programs, and a bucket of money that's attached to each of them. And for those that are just joining, we've been pretty good about the execution against these things over the last number of years, and the staff is pretty well tuned on how to watch this and look at what's working and what's not working, and amend as we need it, and come back to the board to help us understand where they may need to make some shifts. So all that having been said, for the new members of the board and maybe even some of the current members, is there a module in your orientation process that kind of drills into helping understand the nature of each of these categories of support, youth and One Stop and ITA and on and on? Is there a module or something dedicated in the orientation to help them understand this?
Yeah, all great points, Lee, and you're right. Board members, the policy and the financial expenditures and budgets are a critical responsibility that you have. So the more informed you are and the more versed you are. WIOA is complicated enough, but to the extent that you can be generally familiar with the various requirements and some of the breakdown in terms of regulations that apply to each of these programs, I think in the past we've talked about and haven't done, but it probably would be great opportunity between now and the end of the year to do a webinar is what I'm thinking, Lee, based on what you were talking about for board members. Well, one, let me say, I think information at the board meetings makes sense, and the executive committee, looks at the finances and maybe gets in the weeds a little bit more with some of the questions because there tends to be, more time to do that. But I think that we can make, time, for instance, at next board meeting to walk through some of the criteria a little more in depth, on at least in terms of some of the requirements for these programs. But I think probably even better than that might be a webinar opportunity that we put out a few, maybe a month or 6 weeks ahead so that folks can make sure it fits with their calendar, but to invite new members as well as members who've been on this board for a while to really get in the weeds on the WIOA regulations components as it relates to finances. I'm not saying that we're going to pull out the legislation and walk through that. That would be probably pretty boring, but I would say to at least spend an hour to an hour and a half to kind of look at how some of these budgets are determined based on not only the historic spending levels and also what we're seeing in terms of need. And most of this budget, by the way, has been, we look at historic spending levels. We look at, for the ITA budgets, for instance, what we see as typical enrollments and demand for our services on a month-to-month basis. So we develop, we have to split a certain share based on the program that it's in, and then we see, okay, where are we going to put the most resources? Is it going to be an ITA or OJT or work experience based on what we see from the people that we serve and where the historic demand is? But what you don't see in that is, truly what some of the requirements are for ITAs or OJT, and maybe why, for instance, I mentioned that we don't spend as much on OJT. Well, maybe there's reasons why, that's the case, and we could probably go into some more depth on that in a webinar. But I think that would be something like a virtual kind of tutorial on this that may make folks, board members, those who've been with us for a while and those who are just new, to even feel more comfortable going into the next meeting too, in terms of some of the expectations for the financial oversight component of the board. I think it's a great idea to do more in-depth.
I'll volunteer to help with that. Others might want as well. I know it's been a journey for me to try to really understand the components, and I'd love to see kind of a little bit of a framework for the money, the individuals that step up, and the companies that are taking advantage of this. Which companies are and why aren't more taking advantage of it? It's a journey of my own learning that has shown me what my own company, Daugherty, is eligible for, can figure out how to connect to, where it got too hard because of too much paperwork. And so I think that's a component of this budget is how it could be even better spent, and how we might form even more relationships, not only finding the right individuals who can avail themselves of this money because it fits, but also companies that are needing to better understand what this is and how they might engage, which would also help us execute the funds. So I'm all in. I'd love to help you look at that WebEx and the kind of a tutorial on how to pull this thing apart just a little bit more whenever you want to get together to do that.
Yep. I think by the end of the year, so I know we're already running close to the end of the year, but I think this can be something that we bring our fiscal staff into, and we're learning, we've had some new fiscal staff as well in the last year, so they're learning a lot more too, and it would probably be a good opportunity for all of us. We're going to be getting some financial training as well as a board in, this is something that the state is hosting for all local boards in the early part of November. So I'm thinking, I know we get Thanksgiving holiday, takes a lot of time for folks, you know, away from the office potentially. And then of course, it'll be close to the end of the year, holiday time may take some more time. So maybe a sweet spot could be a period in maybe early part of December, but we'll think about the dates for that and follow up. But yes, I think that's a good idea. And we're certainly equipped to be able to you know, do that training and do that session, and then also see what questions members have, because some of you may not be asking them here, but you may have them, obviously. And so we can create a space where folks, and we would have more time to really walk through some of this, I think, at a more detailed level. But again, this budget was developed primarily based on historic levels of spending, based on the need that we see in terms of staffing of these programs. And then the programs itself for the direct participants, the ITA, OJT, work experience, incumbent worker training, apprenticeship, were all developed to based on what we see as the general trends. And again, these budgets, because much of them are direct participant spending, we could move within certain programs, you know, budgets to meet the need of people. If we see a lot more demand for work experience, for instance, we could move money from the ITA budgets to the work experience to account for that if we don't see ITAs being demanded as much, if that makes sense. So it's meant to be a starting point budget. These internal program costs are determined based on payroll and other, you know, required fixed costs like the rent contributions that we make, and how we have to assign, you know, funding to support that. So with that being said, we do need to get a vote on approving the budget so that we can publicly post it as required for compliance purposes. And so I'll just ask Mr. Chair if we can get a motion for, if you could ask the board for a motion and then take a vote, and we'll vote by acclamation on this.
Greg, and all those questions. If there are no other questions, would someone please make a motion to approve program year FPY 23-24 budget?
This is Lee Metcalf. I make a motion to approve this budget.
Second, Glenn Mizell.
We have a motion and a second. We can do this through acclamation, so I'll give everyone a chance if there's any no's or abstentions. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those that are opposed. And if there are any abstentions.
That would be me, just one, I guess.
And state your name.
Mary
Is that Mary
Moriarty.
Moriarty? Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you,
And
Mary.
actually,
Thank you,
this is
Mary.
Caroline Battles, I abstain.
Thank you, Caroline. So through your voice vote, it has passed with 2 abstentions. So, Mr. Director, what's our next order of business?
Yep. So our next order of business is to vote on several standard programs that we receive allocations for. So we're just voting to receive money from the state to administer these programs. And so let me pull up the PowerPoint again so I can show you what those are. And you should have seen it in your board packet initially. Most, I think all of these, one maybe. Let me pull this up. Okay, so let me go from the beginning. Do you see, if you give me a thumbs up, Mr. Chair, on the, do you see a vote screen? It says votes at the top? Okay. So we have our DSS programs, that's Department of Social Services. These are programs that the state of Missouri gives that they support and administer every year. These are the Skill Up programs and Jobs League programs. They're meant to support primarily individuals who are low income or are eligible for food stamps to ensure a path to self-sufficiency and stability. And so in many ways, we use these programs to augment or enhance the existing WIOA programs that we have. So Skill Up supports, can be used for skills-based training opportunity. And our Jobs League program tends to be geared towards our youth and helping to provide them more, job opportunities, subsidized job opportunities while they're going through the program. And so these allocations typically get added to budgets for the subcontractors that are administering those programs as additional resources to support, again, jobs for youth, and then for Skill Up, mostly geared towards adults. And so we tend to give we do give the Skill Up program funding to our adult and dislocated worker provider. We give Jobs League program to our out-of-school youth programs. And so we'll split that amount between the two. But I think these programs are, again, familiar to most people who've been on the board for a while because we receive the allocations every year. If you would vote no on them or you wouldn't support us receiving them, it would just mean that we would return them to the state if the majority says no. But we see these as valuable resources that exist in support of the WIOA programs that we have. And they don't have to follow the same requirements as WIOA. So there might be a youth, for instance, who is not eligible for WIOA purposes, but might be eligible for Jobs League funding. And so it's a way for us to meet the varied needs of the community that we serve. And we found at times that these programs are a little less restrictive in some ways than some of the eligibility requirements for WIOA. So it can be used, again, as a additional supplemental resource. In some cases, we've combined these programs, too, to support a youth who may go through one WIOA program, but might want to also go through a Jobs League program as well. And there can be co-enrollments in those programs. So any questions about those programs based on what I just described? Again, many of you who've been on the board for a while are probably familiar with it, but those who are new might have some questions. Okay, if not, I would just ask Mr. Chair that we take separate votes on each of the programs. So Skill Up, one vote, and then Jobs League, one vote. I know I have them combined here for the presentation.
Okay. So we'll ask for individual motions. So would someone please make a motion to receive the DSS program funding for the Skill Up program?
So moved. This is Jeff.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor to receive the Skill Up program funding, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? And are there any abstentions?
Mary Moriarty again.
Caroline Battles again.
Thank you very much. That motion has passed. Would someone please make a motion to receive the DSS funding program for the Job League program?
John Bowman.
Second.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jeff. All those in favor in receiving the Job League program funding?
Aye.
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 Are there any opposed? And finally, are there any abstentions?
Mary.
Caroline.
Thank you. The next one, could someone please make a motion to receive the EO funding program allocation?
So moved.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? And finally, abstentions.
Mary.
Caroline.
Thank you. And finally, the last one, would someone please make a motion to receive the incentive fund program funding?
Mr. Chair, before anyone makes a motion, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to say real quick what the incentive fund is because folks may not be used to that one. The EO funding that we just voted on is funding that supports our EO operations, which is required by law. We're supposed to have an equal opportunity office. We have an officer, Angela Irby, who's on the call, as well as staff, Michelle Patterson, that supports EO functions. And that just makes sure that we are tuned to ensuring that our subrecipients and our job center and everything is in compliance with equal opportunity laws. So that funding supports staff and professional development for the EO program. So support, thanks for your support on that. And then the incentive fund, just so you all know, we got the incentive fund because we met our targets last year for enrollments. This fund is meant, it's a new thing that is being awarded to us, so I want to just take a quick second to explain it. But basically, it's funds that were released by the state in addition to our existing WIO allocation, and so it's considered kind of from the discretionary pot that the state has. They used it, they call it an incentive because they were using it as an incentive for the local boards to meet their performance goals. So we had enrollment targets, for instance, that we had to meet, and we did successfully meet those in the previous program year. And so these funds were awarded to us to expend, and they're meant to kind of be used for what we feel are appropriate needs that we have in the community. So it's a little more flexible than what some of the other programs are. What we thought we needed, or at least what we initially recommended, was that we wanted to use these funds to support increased outreach, and I don't want to call it marketing efforts, but marketing or community outreach, public awareness, informational materials to make sure that people in the community know more about our job center. So one example is we're working on a video to showcase how our job center services operate, essentially. And we can share that video with partners. We can share that video online through social media so that people in the community can see that there's a resource out in St. Louis County called the Missouri Job Center that can provide a variety of services for them. So we're doing an informational video using some of those funds. We're also looking at doing some professional development using those funds, and right now I'm thinking that we'll do case management training for new subrecipient staff, professional development to help them see what the best practices look like in case management, because we think that that's an area where there's need as we look at how we deliver our programs, quality, making sure that we have better quality case management going on. And so we'll pay somebody to come in and facilitate a training, a professional development for case management support. And then the final piece of the incentive fund was to also look at if we need any new equipment or technology to meet the needs of people in our community who might require accommodations. So looking at our assistive technology, for instance, and making sure that we have the most up-to-date assistive technology available in our job center. So if someone has a visual impairment or hearing impairment, they're able to have the latest equipment and resources. We're also looking at investing in limited English proficiency services. That would be services to help folks who may be speaking English as a second language and who might need translation services to be able to access our services, our overall services, our job center services. And so that's what we've kind of prepared as a tentative plan for expending that incentive fund. But the money can be used, and we can revise our proposal for how we use that based on what we need. But that's how we've kind of prepared to implement that $50,000. So just wanted you to have that detail before you vote on it.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation. There are no questions. Receive those funds.
So do we want to vote?
Motion and a second to receive the incentive funds.
So moved. Do we have a second?
And a second.
Second, Reginald Scott.
Thank you, Reginald. Okay. All those in favor of receiving the incentive fund, they signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? And those abstentions?
Mary,
Caroline,
Thank you. Greg?
Okay, great. So, wait, yeah, you see you took the vote. Okay, we're good. Then, the only other thing that we want to do, well, we have on the agenda is a closed session. I'm looking at the time though, and it's almost 9:10. we might need to table it until the next meeting, which we currently have scheduled for November. We'll send out a reminder today on what that meeting is, and it's not too far off, so a few weeks away, but it's to update the board on some proceedings that you're all aware of, and so we want to make sure that we take the time to do that. We may need to do it at that session versus here. But why I'm saying that is because I don't know if we still have a quorum. A lot of times folks start to drop off around this time as we're approaching 9:30. So I don't know if we've had any drop-offs. I don't know if we have a quorum to take a roll call vote and move into closed session, but that's my flag for this right now, Mr. Chair. So Mavis, do you have a sense of, I mean, we could do a roll call vote and see, but do you have a sense of if we've had any drop-offs that would affect our quorum?
I'm reviewing now. We're at 11. We have quorum still.
Okay, well then, if we want to get a.
Sorry about that. I had both my microphones on. If we want to get a motion then to go into closed session, then I think we should do it, Mr. Chair. I think it'll probably be about a 15-minute. Just want to give a quick update on something for the board. So if you can stay with us for that time, we'd appreciate it.
Okay. So I would like to, I've got to read this and if someone could make this motion and second. And so the motion would be to have our board consider a motion to go into closed session pursuant to section 610.021 subparagraph 1 RSMO and section 114.020.1 subparagraph 1 SLCRO. If we could have a motion and a second.
So moved.
Seconded.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed?
Sorry, we need to do a roll call vote. Don't be back for this. We need to do a roll call.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Roll call. Brad Ackman. Brad Ackman. Jason Archer.
Yes.
Jim Barrett.
Here.
Caroline Battles. Caroline Battles. Jerry Bowles. Jerry Bowles. John Bowman.
Yes.
Brian Karp.
Yes.
Phyllis Ellison. Phyllis Ellison. John Gall. John Gall. Mary Grott. Mary Grott. Elliot Henry. Elliot Henry. Quintius Henry.
Yes.
Linda Huntsman.
Yes.
Jeff Mazur.
Yes.
Lee Metcalf.
Yes.
Lydia Mitchell.
Yes.
Gwen Mizell.
Yes.
Mary Moriarty.
Yes.
Robert Morrison.
Yes.
Vanessa Parker Lewis. Vanessa Parker Lewis. Reginald Scott.
Yes.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Mavis.
Okay,
So
to be transitioned over into a closed a breakout room for the county IT support.
I will be starting the closed session now. Everybody that is invited, you shall be getting a pop-up on your screen asking if you would like to join now or later. Please hit now and you'll be moved over automatically. Everybody else will return shortly.
Mac, are you speaking? We can't hear you if you are. Can everyone hear me?
Alrighty, we are now back in open session.
Thank you all. I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn and a second.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Reginald.
Rob Morrison, second.
Rob, thank you for the second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you all for your time. We have some follow-up. Great discussion today. I really appreciate your participation.
Have a good one.
Thanks.